Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. I don't know if y'all heard, but the whole Elon Musk buying Twitter thing actually happened, spawning terrible takes from every corner of the ideological spectrum, especially from the media. So we'll have the details of the deal, what it might mean. I think it's very up in the air what it'll actually mean, but what it might mean, what the takes are, and whether or not Trump is going to return to the platform or something that everybody has, of course, had their eyes on. Speaking of Trump, new audio from Kevin McCarthy revealed that he has been lying about what he said leading up to January 6th. Actually after January 6th with regards to the president. He was pressed on it by a Fox News reporter multiple times. So we'll play that for you and give you our analysis there. Also, this is from a couple days ago, but we wanted to make sure to bring you this report of MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, actually yelling at Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State.
Freaking out at him in a meeting. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so we're going to talk through that, what it means ultimately for the U.S.-Saudi relationship. New reporting about Kamala Harris and who she is seeking counsel from, which is pretty funny, and some very, very good news. Stephen Donziger, who has been imprisoned and persecuted by Chevron and a corrupt justice system, is officially free. He was released from house arrest. There's a big block party yesterday. We have some exclusive footage of him with our new partner, Jordan Chariton of Status Coup. Really excited to take a look at that and talk about what that means as well. Kim Kelly is here, great friend of the show, incredible labor reporter, out with a new book, tracking the history of the labor movement, parts of it that you may not know. But let's in fact start with Elon Musk.
That's right. Okay, we got a lot of stuff going on here. So we'll start with the news in general. Let's put this up there on the screen. It came across the wire at 3 p.m. yesterday. So there it is, Elon Musk to acquire Twitter. So I'm just going to read here from the official press release. This includes statements from Elon, from the board of directors, and others. Brett Taylor, who is the independent board chair, said, quote, "The Twitter board conducted a thoughtful and a comprehensive process to assess Elon's proposal with a deliberate focus on value, certainty, financing. The proposed transaction will deliver a substantial cash premium. We believe it is the best path forward for Twitter stockholders." So the official Twitter sale price is $54.20 a share, meaning that Elon has acquired the company for approximately $44 billion. The transaction terms are actually quite interesting. We can talk a little bit about it. Musk has secured $25.5 billion of fully committed debt and margin loan financing and is providing an additional $21 billion equity commitment. What he means by that is that Elon's got $21 billion in cash that he will be wiring the company.
Imagine that.
The rest of it is pulled on debt financing. The debt financing part is important for the future of Twitter, and I will get to that in a second. So let's go ahead and put then Elon's additional response there, which was included. This is the full quote from Elon Musk as to why exactly he wanted to acquire Twitter in the first place. And what you can see there is that he says, "Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. I also want to make Twitter better than ever by enhancing the product with new features, making the algorithms open source to increase trust, defeating the spam bots, and authenticating all humans. Twitter has tremendous potential. I look forward to working with the company and the community of users to unlock it." Let's put the next one up there on the screen, please. And what you can see is that he says, "I hope that even my worst critics remain on Twitter because that is what free speech means." Very interesting to me, Krystal, that he's leaning more into the free speech aspect, even though he still certainly has a monumental economic task ahead of him. So he took out $22 billion in loans, both against his Tesla stock and I believe against some of his other holdings. Now, why that matters is that what I was reading today, at a 4 to 5% interest rate, Elon has got to pay back $1 to $2 billion per year just in debt in order to make sure that the company doesn't go bust and he remains on top of that. Now, personally, he can probably make that happen. But if he doesn't want to take a massive bath, that means a couple of things. Well, there's going to be a lot of layoffs at Twitter. I don't see any way that he can be able to run the company. So they have about $300 to $400 million in payroll. So right now, Parag Agarwal, the CEO, in a town hall, he's like, look, all of your jobs are safe for a year, all of that. So in the immediate term, Elon has got to come up with a serious amount of cash out of this company in order to start paying back some of this loan. Like I said, he could run it like a newspaper and just take a loss on this thing for many many years, but that's still a precarious financial position. No person on earth wants to lose literally $1 billion per year.
Right.
Yeah,
so on the one hand, him taking the company private means that he does not have to have that fiduciary responsibility of the profit margin and, shareholder interest is the end all be all. That gives him a certain amount of flexibility to pursue ideological ends that are not directly related to the profit margin. But what you're pointing out is that doesn't mean that there isn't any pressure on him financially to ultimately make and keep the product profitable and keep it growing and all of those things. So there are competing interests here. And I also just would say, it's one thing to say, like, I'm for free speech and it's the bedrock of democracy. I think everybody should, whether you're like, you hate this and you're freaked out about it, or whether you think this is the greatest thing that ever happened, I think everybody should temper their expectations a little bit until we see what he actually does.
That's right. And so it's going to take 3 to 6 months for this deal to actually close. There's still a lot of P's and Q's and all these things that have to be minded, and everything has to be crossed and signed and et cetera. And the top 2,000 shareholders of Twitter, they are not going to be bought out of the company if they decide to stay. So some of the top executives. Now, in terms of CEO Parag Agrawal, here's what he said, quote, let's put it up there on the screen. Twitter has a purpose and a relevance that impacts the entire world. Deeply proud of our teams and inspired by the work that has never been more important. So some interesting stuff happening in the all hands on deck meeting that happened yesterday with details leaking out. The number one concern, Krystal, by Twitter employees is, will we continue to be able to work from home? Apparently that was their top one. Kind of fair.
That's totally fair.
Jack Dorsey said that the entire company would be remote work forever. Elon famously is very against remote work, but obviously that's in a car production facility, not really the same. Obviously, Twitter can probably run entirely remotely outside of their server maintenance people, which I believe are currently working in the office. So we don't know what's going to happen on that end. The economics, all of this, though, really do point to a precarious position for the business. I mean, they reported just yesterday, Twitter is a company that is not doing particularly well. We've pointed before, they've lost, I believe, $850 million over the life cycle as a public company. They have a big problem in terms of being entirely reliant on ad revenue. Jack Dorsey actually put out a very interesting thread yesterday where he really revealed some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And here's what he said. He says, the idea and the service is all that matters to me. I will do whatever it takes to protect both. Twitter as a company has always been my sole issue and my biggest regret. It has been owned by Wall Street and the ad model. Taking it back from Wall Street is the correct first step.
Agree with him on that.
I absolutely agree with him. We can say from our personal experience, a lot of people before we launched were like, maybe you should take on investors and all this. And we were like, we don't want to be beholden to somebody. We want to run this, let's say we have to burn cash for a couple of months in order to make the product better. I don't want to be accountable to anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's, times a million whenever you're beholden to the public stockholders.
That's right. And I think, I think our audience closely follows media and corporate media and different business models there, and understands very clearly how we chose a different business model, because if you rely on an ad-driven model, then ultimately who you're serving is not the audience. You're serving those corporate sponsors. That's what it is. That's what that model is. And so ultimately that's what Twitter and all of these social media platforms, including YouTube, that's what they're really all about, is serving those corporate sponsors, not providing you with a good experience or a platform that is beneficial to democracy or any of those things. So I think he is really correct there when he says that the problem, a core problem, one of the core problems has been it being owned by Wall Street and the ad model. He also says, and I think this is also really interesting, in principle, I don't believe anyone should own or run Twitter. It wants to be a public good at a protocol level, not a company. Solving for the problem of it being a company, however, Elon is the singular solution I trust. I trust his mission to extend the light of consciousness. Elon's goal of creating a platform that is, quote, maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is the right one. This is also, he goes on to say, the current CEO Parag's goal and why I chose him. Thank you both for getting the company out of an impossible situation. This is the right path. I believe it with all my heart. Listen, like I said, remains to be seen whether Elon's words actually match up with his actions. But the other thing that this has sparked is some speculation of whether or not Elon might bring Jack back as CEO. Because it seems like what Jack hated the most about running the company was dealing with, it being a public company and dealing with the shareholders and dealing with the board. And so as a private company, you do have a little bit more flexibility to treat it as an idea and use your creativity and have goals other than just profit maximization. And so potentially that certainly is possible that they would go in that direction.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. You know, I was telling you before, I reread Elon Musk's biography, and he sent a very interesting email to SpaceX back in 2013, which really reflects his mindset as to why private companies are better. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I do encourage you guys to go and read it. And what he points to there is that being beholden to the public markets, dealing with the short sellers, dealing with the fact of quarterly by quarterly results, and in SpaceX's case, you're trying to go to space. That is the definition of a long-term business. Guess what doesn't get rewarded by Wall Street? If you have one bad quarter, stock is going to go down. And what he says here is that by going public in regards to SpaceX, it would open itself up to making the wrong strategic moves in just the goal of trying to increase its share price. And whenever your only goal is to increase share price as a public company, which at the end of the day technically is your only fiduciary responsibility, it leads to all sorts of wonky behavior, which is actually bad for the company, but also bad for the country.
Yeah.
I mean, we point out, how many times have we pointed here before, buying back your own stock as a company makes a lot of sense if your only goal is to increase share price. But if, let's say, you're Boeing and you're the backbone of the American aerospace industry, well, now what happens? Now you have a plane that literally doesn't fly in the sky and crashes and kills 500 people because you bought $10 billion worth of your own stock and did not invest it in R&D. So there's a lot of interesting commentary at a meta level as to why private companies can be very superior to a public company.
Yeah, and one thing I like about this whole thing is that it's causing people who may not have considered some of those things before to consider, the downfall of making profit margins and shareholder value the end-all be-all of not just your economy, but your entire society. And for a lot of billionaires, the only thing they really care about is the game of making money. Like, this has never made sense to me, this idea of like, I'm already a billionaire, but I'm really super dedicated to just continuing to make as much money as possible. But there are people who just like love that game of, Wall Street traders, hedge fund guys, private equity dudes. Like, there's a lot of folks who just, when they're a billionaire, they just want to continue that game of making money. But I feel like it's possible for both Elon and Jack that that's just not the most interesting game for them. That's not the thing that ultimately is core to what drives them.
Yes.
And so if that is the case for you, then it makes sense to have a private company where you can have more flexibility to pursue some of the other things that are your ends, in addition to, I'm not saying making money is not important to these guys, but in addition to profit maximization. Listen, guys, I think it's always important to say, and I say this every time we talk about Elon, relying on any billionaire to solve the country's problems is a bad idea. And as I said on Twitter, tussling over like which billionaires are gonna save or doom us is just about the bleakest form of politics I can ultimately imagine. But I think there's some. I'm trying to keep the reasons that we should be hopeful about this in mind, because ultimately Twitter is a really consequential platform in terms of our public square and in terms of our democracy. And if it is run in a somewhat better way with some other goals in mind versus just profit maximization, that could ultimately be a good thing for society.
I think you're right. And like I said, I've had a lot of problems with Elon Musk, and we'll get to this a little bit later in terms of the connections with China and some of the other decisions that he's made. But I think also the greatest business lesson of the last 20 years, you should never bet against him. And whenever he says he's going to do something, he generally will do it. And I think that, if he sticks by the reasons why he bought the company, then it will work out. At the same time, we should not forget these real economic realities. The guy owes $1 billion a year in cash back to the bank. That's a lot of money. And this is the same predicament that has caused many public companies in order to go the wrong way. Elon may be ideologically committed, hopefully, to ditching the ad model and going direct to subscription. But at the same time, Krystal, how many people are really going to pay for Twitter? Are you? Honestly, I don't think I will. Like, I value it as a news gathering service. Maybe it would be a business. As a business expense, it's possible.
Right. I think because of what we do, we would probably, we rely on Twitter so much for surfacing stories for this show and all of that. we would probably pay for it, but we're weirdos.
Yeah, I think you're right. And let's say I didn't have this job. I honestly, don't think I would pay for it.
Honestly, if I didn't have this job, I don't even think I'd be on Twitter, to be honest with you.
So there you go. I mean, that matters a lot.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.